Renaissance, bridging theory with everyday practice. A lot of us adults already track the things that affect how we perform. We track our sleep, our steps, our training, our heart rate, our stress, our recovery, our routine. Some people use a Whoop band. Some use an Apple Watch. Some use a Fitbit, Garmin, Oura Ring, or even just the health app on their phones. And we do this because we understand something simple. Performance is not random. It comes from habit. So if we know that about ourselves, then education should be honest enough to recognize the same thing in students. At college and university, we ask students to do very demanding cognitive work. We expect them to focus for long periods, take in complex ideas, remember large amounts of content, manage deadlines, balance work, study, family, pressure, and social life, then perform when it counts. But too often, we only talk to students about the work itself. We talk about revision, assignments, attendance, deadlines, grades, but we do not talk enough about the condition they're in when they try to learn. Because a tired student does not think like a rested student. A stressed student does not learn like a regulated student. A student who is sleeping badly, eating badly, recovering badly, and turning up mentally drained is not arriving in the same state as someone whose routine is actually supporting their learning. That is not soft. That is not an excuse. That is psychology. And that is why wearing wearable technology is worth discussing in colleges and universities. Not because an Apple Watch is going to write an assignment for you. Not because a Whoop band can magically tell you who is focused. Not because a device replaces discipline, teaching, or effort. But because wearables can make certain things visible. Sleep, heart rate, stress patterns, activity levels, recovery, consistency, routines. And once those things become visible, they become easier to talk about, easier to reflect on, and easier to improve. That matters because attainment is not only about intelligence. It is not only about how many hours someone says they've revised. It's not only about sitting at a desk with a laptop open until midnight. Readiness matters, recovery matters, routine matters, sleep matters. And if we're honest, a lot of students are trying to learn in a constant state of low-level exhaustion. Late nights, broken sleep, too much caffeine, too much screen time, irregular routines, stress building quietly in the background. And then we wonder why attention slips, why memory is unreliable, and why students say they revised, but nothing has really stuck. Sometimes the issue is not effort. Sometimes the issue is the state the student is in when they're trying to make the effort. This is where something like an Apple Watch can become more than just a lifestyle device. A student may notice that after 3 poor nights of sleep, their concentration drops. They may notice that their stress levels rise before deadlines. They may notice that on days where they're barely moved, sit for hours, and sleep late, their energy the next day is poor. They may notice that their revision feels harder when their routines have collapsed. That information matters. Not because the data is perfect, because it's not. Not because every student needs a device, because they don't. But because the pattern can start a better conversation. And that is the educational value. The real value is not surveillance. It's not policing students. It's not turning learning into a dashboard. The value is reflection. It helps students connect their habits to their performance. It gives them language for what they're experiencing. Instead of simply saying, I cannot focus, they can start asking, how did I sleep? What has my stress looked like this week? Have I moved at all today? Am I actually recovered? Is my routine helping my learning or damaging it? That is powerful because in college and university, students are expected to become more independent. But independence does not mean leaving students to figure everything out alone. It means giving them better tools to understand themselves. And this is where teachers, lecturers, tutors, and pastoral staff have an opportunity. We can talk about sleep during induction. We could talk about routine before exam season. We can help students understand that revision is not just about hours. It's about the quality of attention inside those hours. We can build short sessions around performance habits. We can ask better questions. What happened to your concentration after several poor nights of sleep? What happens to your motivation when your routine falls apart? Why does the same piece of work feel manageable one week and impossible the next? How does stress affect your memory? What habits make you more likely to turn up not prepared? This is not gimmicky. This is helping students become better learners. And there is something important about modeling this as adults. because many teachers, lecturers, coaches, and professionals already track their own habits. They know poor sleep affects their patients. They know stress affects their clarity. They know routine affects their performance. They know they cannot separate the body from the brain. So when a lecturer says, I pay attention to my sleep because I know it affects how I think, that lands. When a teacher says, your body and your brain are not separate when it comes to learning, that lands too. Because students need more than content. They need frameworks. They need habits. They need language. They need to understand that learning is not just something that happens in the classroom, lectures, theatres, or library. It is affected by what happens before they arrive there. So the point is not that every student needs a Whoop band. The point is not that every student needs an Apple Watch. The point is definitely not that technology replaces great teaching. The point is simpler than that. If we want to focus stronger, learn better, achieve more, and have more independent students, then we have to take serious conversations that can improve the conditions that they're in. Sleep is part of work. Recovery is part of work. Routine is part of work. Stress management is part of work. And sometimes the most useful thing technology can do is make those conditions harder to ignore, because your brain does not learn separately from your body. And the more quickly colleges and universities accept that, the more intelligently we can teach. Renaissance. Bridging theory with everyday practice. Thank you.